You don't get disrespected because you're weak. You get disrespected because you tolerate what should have cost someone access to you. There is a moment, a single moment, that determines how every toxic person will treat you from that day forward. It's not when they insult you. It's not when they ignore your boundaries. It's not even when they lie to your face. It's the moment right after. The moment where you decide whether your silence means strength or permission. Toxic people are not confused. They are observant. They are constantly scanning for consequences. They test with small things first. A joke at your expense, a late reply after you answered instantly, a subtle dismissal of your opinion in front of others, a favor they forget to return. They are measuring one thing. Will there be a cost? If there is no cost, the behavior escalates. If there is hesitation, they push further. If there is emotional reaction without consequence, they smile internally. Because now they know you are safe to exploit. Human psychology is simple at its core. Behavior that is rewarded continues. Behavior that has no consequence intensifies. Behavior that costs something stops. Most people think respect is earned by being kind, patient, understanding. But respect, especially from toxic personalities, is enforced by boundaries backed with action. You don't have to yell. You don't have to argue. You don't have to prove anything. You only have to do this once. Withdraw access. Not emotionally, not dramatically, strategically. Let's go deeper. Toxic individuals operate on power dynamics. They are addicted to control, even in subtle forms. Control over your mood, control over your time, control over your attention, control over your reactions. If they can provoke you, they own a piece of you. If they can delay you and you still wait, they rank above you. If they can disrespect you and still receive your energy, they've secured dominance. That's the real game being played. And most people don't even realize they're playing. There are 3 psychological drivers behind toxic disrespect. 1, testing dominance. 2, seeking validation. 3, projecting insecurity. Let's break it down. When someone interrupts you repeatedly, they're not just excited. They're positioning themselves higher in the social hierarchy. When someone makes backhanded compliments, they're not just joking. They're lowering you slightly to elevate themselves. When someone cancels last minute but expects understanding, they're not just busy, they're testing whether your time is less valuable than theirs. If you respond emotionally, you validate their power. If you respond passively, you validate their access. If you over-explain, you validate their authority over your comfort. The one move that changes everything is controlled detachment. Not anger, not revenge, not confrontation, detachment. Here's why it works. Toxic people thrive on emotional return. They need reaction to feel significant. Even your frustration feeds them. Even your arguments keep them engaged. Even your attempts to fix the situation signal investment. When you calmly reduce availability after a boundary violation, something shifts inside them. They feel the loss of influence, and that loss triggers discomfort. Human beings are wired to value what becomes scarce. If your attention was constant and suddenly becomes measured, if your warmth was consistent and suddenly becomes selective, if your access was open and suddenly becomes restricted, they notice immediately. But here's where most people fail. They announce it. I'm done with you. You always disrespect me. You don't value me. The moment you explain your withdrawal, you reduce its power, because now it becomes emotional negotiation. Instead, you shift behavior without a speech. Example, they make a disrespectful joke in public. You don't argue. You don't laugh it off. You don't explain why it hurt. You look at them, pause, change subject, and later you reduce your engagement. Shorter responses, less availability, less enthusiasm. When they ask what's wrong, you say calmly, I don't entertain disrespect. That's it. No lecture, no debate, no emotional display, just a boundary, followed by behavioral consequence. The human brain associates patterns quickly. Disrespect to loss of access. Do this once with clarity, and most toxic personalities recalibrate instantly, because now there is cost. But let's go deeper into the emotional layer. Why is this so hard for you? Because you fear loss. You fear that enforcing a boundary will push them away, and that fear keeps you tolerating small violations that accumulate into resentment. But here's the truth. Anyone who leaves because you required respect was never aligned with you. They were benefiting from your tolerance. There is a psychological phenomenon called intermittent reinforcement. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. Toxic people will disrespect you, then show affection, ignore you, then give attention, belittle you, then praise you. Your brain becomes hooked on the uncertainty. You start chasing the good version of them, and every time they return to warmth, you reset the boundary. This cycle only breaks when you stop rewarding the violation. Silence is powerful when it is controlled. Distance is powerful when it is intentional. Indifference is powerful when it is genuine. But indifference cannot be faked. You cannot pretend not to care while secretly hoping they chase you. That's still emotional dependency. The shift must be internal first. You must genuinely accept this. I would rather lose access to you than lose respect for myself. Say that again internally. I would rather lose access to you than lose respect for myself. When that belief becomes real, your behavior changes naturally. Your tone becomes calm. Your eye contact becomes steady. Your words become fewer. Your presence becomes heavier, because now you are not negotiating your worth. Toxic individuals sense insecurity like sharks sense blood. If your boundary trembles, they push. If your voice shakes, they test. If you smile while being insulted, they escalate. Confidence is not loud, it's consistent, and consistency terrifies manipulators. Let's talk about the single action you must take the first time they cross a serious boundary. You remove reward immediately. If they disrespect you in conversation, the conversation ends sooner than planned. If they mock you, the warmth disappears. If they lie, trust access shrinks. You don't threaten, you don't dramatize, you adjust, and you do not reverse the adjustment quickly. This is critical. Most people enforce a boundary for one day, then soften. That teaches toxic personalities that persistence breaks you. Instead, the consequence must outlast the discomfort. Long enough for their brain to associate behavior with outcome. This is behavioral conditioning applied socially. You are training people how to treat you. Every reaction you give is instruction. If you laugh when insulted, you instruct them to continue. If you argue passionately, you instruct them that provoking you brings excitement. If you withdraw calmly, you instruct them that disrespect leads to distance. Distance is the most feared consequence for someone who relies on control, especially if they value your presence. Now let's address something uncomfortable. Some toxic people will escalate when they lose control. They may accuse you of being cold. They may say you've changed. They may attempt guilt manipulation. This is predictable. When someone loses influence, they try to regain it. But if your boundary is rooted in self-respect, you remain steady. You don't defend your decision aggressively. You say, I treat people with respect. I expect the same. And then you stop talking. Silence after a boundary is more powerful than a paragraph, because silence forces reflection. Over-explanation invites negotiation. You are not negotiating your dignity. Let's explore the emotional tension inside you when you enforce this. There will be anxiety. Your nervous system will feel discomfort because you're breaking a familiar pattern. If you're used to being accommodating, your body associates harmony with safety. Standing firm feels like danger, but that discomfort is growth. It's your identity upgrading. There is a transformation that happens when you do this once, truly once, without backtracking. You begin to see yourself differently. You walk differently. You speak differently. You tolerate less. And here's the paradox. When you need people less, they respect you more. Not because you are cruel, but because you are self-contained. Self-contained individuals cannot be manipulated easily. They do not chase approval. They do not overcompensate. They do not beg for understanding. They state. They act. They move. And toxic people quickly realize, this one is not easy to control. Let's talk about emotional energy. Every interaction is an exchange. Toxic individuals often extract more than they give. They drain attention, they drain validation, they drain patience. When you continue engaging normally after being disrespected, you are paying for your own mistreatment. Imagine paying someone to insult you, That's what attention after disrespect is. When you cut that supply, the dynamic shifts. Now they must invest to regain access, and many won't, which is good because your life becomes quieter, cleaner, more powerful. Here's something important. This strategy is not about playing games. It's about aligning actions with standards. You are not manipulating. You are calibrating. You are teaching through behavior, and behavior speaks louder than words. The reason you only need to do this once is because reputation spreads internally in social circles. When one person realizes you enforce boundaries calmly, others pick up on it. Your energy changes. You stop being the easy target. Now let's go even deeper into the psychology of dominance. Dominance is not aggression, it's emotional stability under pressure. If someone insults you and you stay composed, they lose leverage. If someone attempts to provoke jealousy and you remain unreactive, they lose influence. The most powerful position in any toxic dynamic is emotional neutrality, not coldness, not cruelty, neutrality. You do not rise to the bait. You do not sink into insecurity. You observe, you adjust, you move accordingly, and when necessary, you leave. Leaving is the ultimate boundary. Not storming out, not dramatic exit, just absence. The absence of someone who used to tolerate. That absence echoes, because humans fear losing what validated them. Toxic people rely on your reaction to feel significant. When that reaction disappears, they confront their own emptiness. And that is uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. But here's the truth you must accept before this works. You must be willing to lose them. If you are not willing to lose them, your boundary will always bend. Desperation is visible, and toxic individuals sense it immediately. Self-respect requires risk. It requires the courage to say internally, if this connection requires me to shrink, it is not worth maintaining. The first time you enforce this, it will feel unnatural. The second time, easier. The third time, automatic. Eventually, you become someone who toxic personalities avoid testing altogether. Because your response pattern is clear. Disrespect equals distance. Not drama, not chaos. Distance. And distance from a high-value, emotionally stable individual is a loss. You don't need to threaten someone to make them respect you. You need to show them you are comfortable walking away. That's it. The ultimate power in any dynamic belongs to the person who needs it least. When your identity is no longer tied to being liked, you become impossible to control. Let me say something that might sting. Some people in your life are only there because you tolerate more than you should. The moment you enforce a boundary, they disappear, and you will mistake that disappearance for loss. But it's filtration. Your environment upgrades when your standards upgrade. Now imagine this. A toxic person makes a subtle dig at you in front of others. Old you laughs nervously. Old you over-explains. Old you confronts emotionally later. New you pauses, looks at them calmly, and says, "What did you mean by that?" Silence. They scramble. You hold eye contact. They either retract or expose themselves. Either way, you don't smile. You don't fill the silence. You let them feel the weight of their words. That single moment shifts hierarchy, because now they know you are aware. Awareness plus calm is intimidating, but this only works if it's authentic. If inside you are still desperate for approval, the tone will betray you. So the real work is internal. You must detach your worth from their validation. You must stop seeking comfort from those who cause discomfort. You must accept solitude over disrespect. That is the psychological turning point. Once that shift happens internally, the external behavior becomes effortless. And here's what's fascinating. When you stop reacting emotionally to toxicity, you start seeing it clearly. You recognize patterns sooner, you detect manipulation faster, you feel less confused, because emotional attachment clouds perception, detachment sharpens it. You realize who respects you naturally, and who only respects you when you withdraw. The second group is transactional. They don't respect you. They respect access, and access is a privilege, not a right. The day you truly believe that is the day, everything changes. You are not obligated to tolerate behavior that diminishes you. You are not required to explain why you expect basic respect. You are not responsible for managing someone else's immaturity. You are responsible for your standards. And standards without enforcement are fantasies. This is why you only need to do this once, correctly, because once people realize you follow through, the testing decreases dramatically. Human beings adapt quickly to clear consequences. It's inconsistency that creates chaos. Be consistent once, firm once, detached once, and the message will spread through your behavior louder than any speech ever could. The toxic ones will either adjust or remove themselves. Both outcomes serve you, and you will finally experience something rare: peace without tension, respect without begging, power without aggression, and it all started with one decision. The decision to withdraw access the moment disrespect appears, without drama, without fear, without apology. That is the move. That is the shift. There is a deeper layer to this, because sometimes the toxic person is not loud, not obvious, not openly disrespectful. Sometimes they are subtle. They smile while undermining you. They praise you publicly, but compete with you privately. They support you, but never fully. And this is where psychological strength becomes essential. The most dangerous disrespect is disguised as normal behavior. Let's talk about micro-disrespect, the delayed responses when it benefits them, the constant one-upping in conversations, the subtle eye rolls, the sarcasm masked as humor, the way they change the subject when you talk about your wins. Individually, these seem small. Collectively, they erode your confidence. And here's what happens inside your brain. Your nervous system detects inconsistency. You feel slightly tense around them, slightly guarded, slightly unsure. But because nothing big happened, you convince yourself you're overthinking. You're not. Your intuition is pattern recognition operating below conscious awareness. Toxic personalities rely on your self-doubt. They want you questioning yourself, because someone who trusts their perception is hard to manipulate. This is why the second part of doing it once is internal alignment. You must trust what you feel the first time, not the 10th time. If you feel disrespected, you probably were. And you do not need a courtroom-level argument to validate your experience. Respect is felt. Disrespect is felt. You don't need witnesses. Now let's go even deeper into power dynamics. In every interaction, there is a subtle negotiation of value. Who talks more? Who listens more? Who apologizes first? Who accommodates more? Who initiates more? If you are always the one adjusting, you are unconsciously lowering your perceived value. High-value individuals are cooperative, but not accommodating at their own expense. There is a difference. Cooperation is mutual. Accommodation without reciprocity is self-abandonment. And toxic people are masters at detecting self-abandonment. They look for the person who will tolerate slightly more than they should. That's their entry point. So when we say, do this once, it also means stop over-giving, stop over-explaining, stop over-apologizing, stop over-investing in people who under-invest in you. Energy must be mirrored. If someone gives you minimal effort, you match it, not to punish, but to maintain balance. Balance creates respect. Imbalance creates exploitation. Now let's address something crucial. Sometimes when you enforce boundaries, you will feel guilt, especially if you were conditioned to be agreeable, especially if you grew up believing that keeping peace equals being good. But peace at the cost of dignity is silent self-betrayal, and self-betrayal accumulates into resentment. Resentment changes your personality. You become passive-aggressive, irritable, emotionally exhausted, all because you didn't do the hard thing once. You didn't remove access. You didn't say no calmly. You didn't detach when the red flag first appeared. Here is the psychological transformation that happens when you start enforcing boundaries consistently. Your brain begins to associate confrontation with empowerment instead of fear. Each time you hold a boundary, your self-trust increases. Self-trust is magnetic. People feel it. It shows in how you pause before responding. It shows in how you don't rush to fill silence. It shows in how you are comfortable disagreeing without hostility. Toxic individuals prefer emotionally reactive people, because emotional reactivity is predictable. Calm firmness is not. Calm firmness creates uncertainty for them, and uncertainty weakens their control. Let's talk about the moment they test you again after you've enforced your boundary. Because they will, not always, but often, they'll make a smaller comment, a lighter joke, a subtle probe. This is the final test. If you fold here, the entire dynamic resets. If you remain consistent, the dynamic permanently changes. Consistency is the language of authority. You don't need a title. You don't need dominance. You need behavioral stability. Imagine this scenario. They speak to you in a dismissive tone. Instead of reacting emotionally, you say, "Speak to me properly, calm, direct, no anger." If they laugh it off, you hold eye contact, silence. If they continue, you end the interaction. "Let's talk later." And you leave. No scene. That is power, because you controlled your response. You enforced your standard, and you didn't seek validation for it. Now let's explore something uncomfortable but necessary. Some toxic people will never adjust, not because you did it wrong, but because they are deeply invested in dominance. In those cases, your boundary doesn't fix the dynamic. It exposes it. And exposure is clarity. Clarity allows you to make a decision. Reduce them to acquaintance level, or remove them entirely. Not everyone deserves full access to your personality. Not everyone deserves your vulnerability. Access is layered. Inner circle, mid-circle, outer circle. Toxic behavior pushes people outward. You don't have to hate them. You just relocate them in your life. This prevents emotional chaos. Now let's talk about your body language, because boundaries are not only verbal. When you are constantly leaning in, nodding excessively, smiling to ease tension, you signal appeasement. When you sit upright, speak slower, reduce filler words, and hold pauses, you signal certainty. Certainty reduces disrespect. Even eye contact changes dynamics. Too little eye contact signals insecurity. Too intense eye contact signals aggression. Steady, relaxed eye contact signals composure. Composure is intimidating to people who rely on intimidation. Now let's address romantic dynamics. Toxic partners often use emotional withdrawal as punishment. They go cold to regain power. If you chase them when they withdraw, you reinforce the tactic. Instead, you mirror their energy. They go cold, you become busy. They delay replies, you delay slightly too. Not as revenge, but as calibration. If they care, they adjust. If they escalate games, you escalate distance. Love without respect becomes control, and control disguised as love is psychological imprisonment. You do not beg for basic decency, you enforce it. Now let's examine workplace toxicity. A colleague takes credit for your work. The first instinct is anger. The strategic move is documentation. Then calm clarification in the next meeting. "I'd like to add that I handled the data analysis for that project." No accusation, just facts. If they interrupt you, you say, "Let me finish." Direct, controlled. No hostility. Toxic professionals rely on your hesitation. Remove hesitation once, and their strategy weakens. Remember this. People treat you according to the level of consequence they associate with mistreating you. Not according to your kindness. Not according to your potential. According to consequence. This doesn't mean you become cold or harsh. It means you become precise. You choose where your energy flows. You stop rewarding poor behavior with attention. Now let's go into the emotional core of this transformation. When you finally enforce a boundary without guilt, something shifts internally. You feel lighter, stronger, clearer, because you stopped abandoning yourself. Self-abandonment is exhausting. Self-respect is energizing. And once you taste the peace that comes from self-respect, you never want to return to tolerating subtle disrespect again. Your tolerance level drops. Your discernment sharpens. You become selective. And selective people are respected. Why? Because selectiveness implies value. If you are available to everyone regardless of behavior, your presence feels common. When your presence requires standards, it feels earned. Earned access creates appreciation. Let's address fear again. What if I end up alone? Temporary solitude is better than permanent disrespect. And here's the paradox. When you raise your standards, you filter out chaos. That creates space. In that space, healthier connections enter. But if you keep filling your life with people who test and disrespect you, there's no room for alignment. You must clear before you receive. Now imagine yourself months from now. You respond slower. You speak clearer. You tolerate less. You observe more. People around you adjust. Conversations feel cleaner. There's less tension because you stopped negotiating your dignity. You did it once, correctly, without apology, without emotional explosion, without seeking approval afterward. You simply aligned behavior with standard, and that alignment reshaped your social world. Let's crystallize the core principle. The first time someone disrespects you is information. The second time is confirmation. The third time is permission. Never allow it to reach permission. Address it at information. That is how you prevent escalation. That is how you protect your psychological stability. That is how you maintain quiet authority. Now understand this clearly. You are not trying to dominate people. You are not trying to intimidate. You are creating a predictable environment around you. In your environment, respect is required. Calm is normal. Manipulation fails. Drama dies quickly. When that becomes consistent, toxic personalities either transform around you or fade out, and both outcomes elevate you. You do not need to fight every battle. You only need to enforce one clean boundary when it matters most. That single act creates a reputation for self-respect. And reputation changes how people approach you before they even speak. They think twice. They measure their tone. They reconsider their joke. Because your energy says, I am not the one. Not aggressively, not arrogantly, but confidently. And confidence without hostility is the rarest form of power. Remember this final truth. Respect is not demanded loudly. It is established quietly, through standards, through consistency, through controlled withdrawal when necessary. Do it once, mean it, stand by it, and watch how the entire dynamic shifts. Because the moment people realize you value your dignity more than their approval, disrespect becomes too expensive.